Hello everyone, Stacey Ellis here, back with another video. And today I'm doing a book review. Obviously, if you clicked on it, you know what this book is. It's the first book of Adam and Eve. And some of you might be familiar with this book, and some of you may be familiar with who Adam and Eve is, and you never heard of this book at all. So this book was written a long time ago, just like how the Bible was written a long time ago, but it's not included in our Bible. It's one of those books along with, there's many books that were written during the time of the Bible. And this is just one of those books. It didn't make it into most versions of the Bible. So I think, I could be wrong, but I believe it is in at least one version of the Bible in another country. But I could be wrong. But I'm not here to debate on what books should and should not be in the Bible. I think that God knows people of those different cultures. God knows what, different groups need to read and not read. And so I'm not here to argue about that. I don't think that that's something that will make or break the faith, in my opinion. But with that being said, I have been on this track of life where I've been reading some of these books that aren't in our Bible. And this is one of them that I came across. And the reason why I read it is because I found it in an app that I have. And I can show you the app here. It's called Audio Books and Novels. It's blue. It's a free app. And the books on here are also free. And I will say most of the books are old books, but it has some classics in there. And then it also has some other things that aren't necessarily well-known books. And so this book was found in there. The book of Adam and Eve was found in there. And that's the only reason why I opened it and listened to it, is because it was available to me. I do hope to get a physical copy one day of this and some other books, the book of Jasher, the book of Enoch. I already have the book of Jubilees. So that is on my wish list to actually have a physical copy, because just like with the Bible, there's only so much you get from just listening to it, but actually seeing on the page the different words, I think that it would be beneficial. So that is something that I would want. Again, I'm not saying that this is Holy Scripture. I am not in any position to dictate what's considered to be Holy Scripture or not Holy Scripture. I just put it out there like that. However, that does not mean that there aren't books that are outside of the Bible that were written during the time of the Bible that doesn't have information that can give us more clarity about things we believe in the Bible, some historical things. So I am a firm believer of that. I mean, we read all these other books that, talk about the Bible. We have our favorite pastors that write books. Well, there were people back then that also wrote books. And so I think that there's some people who are afraid of reading these books, which I do understand, because yes, there were some books that were written that are heresy and that may mislead people. Just like there are books today that are heresy and mislead people. So yes, there is that. But that doesn't mean all the books are bad, and it doesn't mean that you can't gain some insight from them. I will say this: if you are someone that does not currently read the Bible, you probably want to read the Bible first before you read some of these extra books, because with some of them, it may confuse you. And if you don't have a strong, firm foundation of what is actually in the Bible, reading these other books may lead you to be confused on certain things. So I want to put that out there first. I always say start with your foundation, the Holy Scripture. And after that, if you want to try other books and read them, it's fine. Like I said, I don't think that reading these books are necessarily bad. If you know of theologians that talk about some of these books, that the pseudepigrapha, the apocrypha, all these different writings that theologians even read, that they're aware of. But you have to, again, you're not the person that can dictate what is Holy Scripture or not. And I know within some communities, particularly in the Protestant community, some people think that they have that authority, but I'm sorry to say it, you don't have the authority of picking what is Holy Scripture. Even though you may think you do not. So knowing that you don't have the authority, just take it as you would take any other book. If somebody were to write a book on prophecy today, or if somebody would write a theological book, or if somebody would just write, they're a Christian and they just wrote about their life during that time. Okay. See it as that. Not that you can't gain insight in there, not that God does not speak through these authors. I most certainly think that God can speak through these authors, and he even prophesies through some of these authors. But saying it's the Holy Scripture, that it is the Bible canon, you don't have that authority. Now, if you feel uncomfortable, you can go to a church that accepts it as part of the Bible canon, if it's something that you really, But again, okay, I'm talking so much about this book before I actually talk about the book. But I did want to set a foundation, because I know when it comes to these extra biblical texts, it can be controversial for some people. Again, I'm not here to be controversial. I'm just reading it as a book. And yes, I gained some interesting insights. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. So the book, again, and I had it open, is the first book of Adam and Eve. Look at that picture. Look at that. You can't tell me that Adam don't have an afro. I'm just saying, he got an afro. He's a brother, in my opinion. And she got a little afro too in that picture. I know it's just a drawing. It's not really them, but I just thought it was kind of cool when I saw it. I was like, look, he's a brother. Okay, so what is this book about? If you're ever interested in reading it, I will say I gave this book 5 stars. 5 stars. I truly enjoyed it. I thought it was so interesting and exciting. I really did enjoy this book. Now, I will say, in the intro, I guess it's the intro or prologue of this book, they give you, at least this version, translated by Rutherford Hayes Platt. They give you a background of this book, and they say that this particular book, the first book of Adam and Eve, is a fiction book. That's what they say. They say it's a fiction book that's based off of possible true things that occurred with Adam and Eve. So there were oral traditions that were passed down through the years about Adam and Eve, and eventually someone wrote it down in the form of this book. Okay, but the whole idea of it is that it's fiction with the possibility that there is actually some truth to it, that there might be nonfiction elements. We don't really know for sure, because Adam and Eve didn't write it down, and it was oral tradition. And some of it, as I was listening to it, it was like, yes, this is definitely fiction. Some of it's very clear that it's fiction. But some of it sounds exactly like what I said. Some of it sounds like it's nonfiction. So I think there is some truth to it, but there's also some non-truth to it. Okay. So it may 100% all be true. That might be the case. Maybe it is. However, I am in no position to make that decision. I'll find out when I get to heaven if it is 100% true or not. But for now, I'm going to say that there might be some true things in it. So what is this book about? It's about Adam and Eve after they leave the Garden of Eden. So if you're familiar with the Genesis story, Adam and Eve took of the forbidden fruit, and as a result, they got banished from the Garden of Eden. And God had placed his angel with his flaming sword in front of the entrance of the garden, so they cannot go back into the garden and can't eat of the fruit of the tree of life, right? So this story talks about what happens after they've been kicked out of the garden. So I will say this. It's very interesting because Satan is still on the scene. So Satan is seen as an angel of darkness throughout the story. He comes over and over again to try to do what he did in the garden. He tries to deceive Adam and Eve. In particular, he tries to deceive Eve the most, which I thought was quite interesting, that he knew that Eve, I guess, would be more gullible of the two. At least that's the impression I get from it. So going through it, I mean, there's some interesting elements and themes in the book. So throughout the whole entire story, Adam and Eve are very distressed and distraught by the fact that they are now, not in the Garden of Eden, and they are going to die one day. They're very upset about that. They're very sad. And so, a lot of the story when they're talking, it keeps going back to that. They're like, oh man, I'm dealing with all of this because of what they did in the garden. So now, they're not in a garden. They're in a place where it's like a desert almost. There's rocks everywhere. It's not pretty. They don't have easy access to water. And so obviously coming from a beautiful garden to a place like that, it can be very heartbreaking and hard. In addition to that, they don't have food. So they went days without eating. And as you can imagine, days without eating is going to make you feel even worse. So, this was a tendency throughout the story, because they didn't have food, they had to, get food. And so, how you feel when you don't have food, how you act and may feel. So just picture Adam and Eve in that scenario. And then on top of that, you have Satan, who doesn't like Adam and Eve still because, and it goes into detail why that is, but pretty much man and his position was once considered to be higher than the angels. But now the angels are considered higher. That's in essence what it talks about in the book. And God goes ahead and he states his first covenant. And the first covenant, which we kind of get a glimpse of it in Genesis with the serpent's head going to be crushed and all of that. That was symbolic of a prophecy of Jesus. Well, in this book, it goes into more detail. And God tells Adam that, I'm sorry, you sinned. As a consequence, you're going to die and you're going to go to hell. That's literally what it says. He's going to go to hell. But you're not going to stay there. In 5,000 and a half years, 5,500 years, I will come and I will make things right. I will die in your place and you will no longer have to be in hell. And so this was the first covenant that was given. And, God actually repeats it over and over again throughout the book because, like I said, Adam and Eve were so distraught that they were in this situation. And so God kept reminding them of this covenant that he has made. But Adam and Eve kept thinking, oh, we can get out of this though. We've already had our consequence, so to speak. We've been disciplined, so God can make it back to how it used to be. And so there's several times throughout the story where they're trying to make it back into the garden, and they're trying to reason with God and say, hey, don't you think that we suffered long enough? Isn't this enough for, the amount of sin that we committed? We just took a bite of the fruit. It was literally just a second. But, all the stuff we're going through is days and days compared to that second. Don't you think that that balances out? So they're trying to reason with God throughout the story. But God says, nope, there's only one way. So that was, I thought, very interesting. So it goes through that throughout the story. And there's some other principles that we take from the Christian religion now that actually is in this book. So there's passages in the Bible that talks about Satan disguising himself as an angel of light. Well, in this story, he disguises himself several times and deceives Adam and Eve several times. So I think they were aware of this story back then, which is part of the reason why, that was a common thing that was known. Other things that I thought was very interesting was, even though Adam and Eve were suffering, you can see God's grace and mercy throughout the story. He provided them with food. He provided them with light. They were in a cave and they couldn't see. He provided them with light. He protected them. He brought them back to life. So Adam and Eve died a few times in the story. Adam died more, and God brought him back to life several times. So it really shows the character of God throughout the story and the character of Satan throughout the story. So I really enjoyed it. I listened to it in the audiobook version, and so the way that it was read, it kind of reminded me of a children's story in a sense. It was so entertaining, and it was so fast-paced. The story does end with Adam and Eve having Cain and Abel. Now so in this story, they have daughters as well, which I thought was interesting. Cain had a sister that was a twin, and Abel also had a sister that was a twin. And apparently they were going to marry each other, and that's how, the population kept going, was because of these twins. So I don't know if it's true. This is the first time I ever heard of, women being born at the same time, but the Bible is very masculine based. They don't talk a lot about the daughters. So it is possible that they might have had daughters along with the sons, and they just not mention it in the Bible. And that would also make sense how they were able to reproduce, afterwards. So maybe this was something that was accepted and it just wasn't written in the Genesis story. Possibly. I don't know. The name. So this is why I want a paper version. I can't remember the names of the daughters, but both of the names were so beautiful, and I never heard it before. I think one was like Lulani or something like that, and then the other one was like, started with an A, Akaya or something. They were very beautiful names, and one of them's name meant beautiful. And I was like, oh, if I have a daughter, I want to name her that. Like, that's so pretty. But I can't remember the name. And I guess I could open it up and listen to it all over again, but this is a 14-hour book, I think, if I remember right. No, not 14-hour. It was a 3-hour book. Where did I get 14 hours from? It was a 3-hour book. But, I don't want to have to look through all that just to find it. So one day I'll get a paper copy of it. So I really enjoyed it. Do I believe it all? I take the place of maybe some of this happened. God performs miracles. Back in the original time, maybe he talked to Adam and Eve like this. Maybe Satan was around like this. I don't know. It's possible. But what I do know is it still teaches about who God is, and the characters of God is still the same. The characters of Satan is still the same, and the characters of Adam and Eve are still the same. So like the themes, it definitely, it's based on biblical principles. It doesn't really add anything, towards doctrine or anything like that that would be misleading or, cause people to fall away from the faith or anything like that. It's all very biblical based. And if anything, I'm so excited because it literally prophesies about Jesus. And so with that being said, even if this is a fiction book, this book was written before Jesus came. So being that it's a fiction book and it was written before Jesus came, it's still prophecy about Jesus, which I thought was so amazing that, like, yeah. So even though it's not in the Bible, it's talked about, it talks about God coming, Jesus coming, and putting things in place. I just think that's so amazing. I don't know, like, and I know for some people hearing that might confuse you and you're like, well, how come it's not in the Bible then? But I don't take that stance because we know, like, even in the New Testament, John says that even if someone to write everything that Jesus said, there wouldn't be enough books. So I know that there's going to be a ton of books, a ton of documents outside the Bible that still has biblical principles and really like deep, meaningful things, biblical concepts. That doesn't mean that there's some corruption occurring, right? So that's how I take it with this book. I actually understand why they have the Bible. I'm not, maybe that can be another video if some of you guys are interested on how we got our current Bible and why certain Bibles are different in different countries. We can have that talk one day. If you're interested in that, leave a comment below. But yeah, I just love this book, you guys. I love it so much. I have to get a hard copy. It was just so fun. I want to listen to it again. It was so fun. 5 stars for sure. Great read. I know a lot of people are doing fiction, biblical fiction. This is the first biblical fiction book. So definitely, get it, listen to it. I truly enjoyed it. I know you will too. So there we have it. I just wanted to talk about it because, like I said, it's a controversial book, but when you read it, it's actually, I think it's a gem. I think it's really a good book. So, all right, that's all I have today. I just wanted to get on here and talk to you guys about that. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up so I know, to continue to have book reviews like this. If you like particular types of books for me to review, I know this one's an interesting one. So if you like that, thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe. I'm trying to get videos out on a regular basis to you guys. I'm here for y'all. I'm here to give y'all information and just encourage y'all and help brighten your day. So if you're interested, subscribe. And if you have any comments, go ahead and leave them down below. If let me know if you ever heard of this book. And if you've heard of it, if you ever read it. And if you never heard of it, or maybe you have heard of it, would you ever read it? Or are you hesitant to read it, being that it's not the Bible? Let me know what you think down below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.